Hello, my name is David Todd and I'd like to present a very simple brief overview of Microservice Architecture Philosophy as it applies to RPA and in particular UiPath RPA, which I'm most familiar with. I have the UiPath RPA Developer Advanced Certification from 2017, the UiPath RPA Solution Architect from 2020, and a total of 49 achievements in the UiPath Academy dashboard. I also have an MBA, a Bachelor of Computer Science, and the like. Now, when we start RPA, we start with a really basic process just to learn, and that's entirely reasonable and entirely fair. So, for example, harvest some data, scrape some data from a web page, put it in a spreadsheet. This is a great learning thing. It's very practical, very useful. There's nothing wrong with it. There's a lot of times where a simple flow like this would make perfect sense. But when you're in the UiPath ecosystem, you very quickly come across what they call the RE framework and the dispatcher performer model. This has two processes and a queue in between. So the dispatcher gets all your data, puts it into the queue and walks away. And your performer wakes up and goes, oh, there's data in my queue. I'll perform the job and finish. The RE framework is very good in certain scenarios. The RE framework is very good for teaching people the concepts of using multiple processes, using queues, triggering, thinking bigger picture than just a simple process. But I believe there are problems with the RE framework. For example, it doesn't really scale. When I talk about scaling, people talk about scaling horizontally and scaling vertically. Scaling vertically means just making a bigger computer. Instead of having an old computer with a little bit of memory, put a bigger, faster computer with more memory, more hard drive, more poke. Scaling horizontal means using multiple computers. So if you're looking at a website like eBay or Google or Microsoft, that's not one computer running that. That's a cluster of computers that are all taking turns running it, sharing the workload, because no one computer can handle that volume of work. Horizontal scaling. Now, our friend the RE framework doesn't really scale horizontally at all, because all the dispatcher does is put your jobs into a queue and the performer goes, oh, how many jobs have we got? I'll grab 10 jobs and I'll do them one, then the next, then the next, then the next, and it does each job from start to finish. It doesn't really spread the load of the work at all. If you're in a hypothetical scenario where you had 10 robots, wouldn't it be great to use all 10 robots to get your job done rather than just one robot working really hard and 9 robots doing nothing? So this is still effectively a monolithic process. And unfortunately, on top of that, the RE framework's framework is very confusing to learning beginning developers. It's not really obvious what this does, what that does, and you're forced to use a model which is not always intuitive and is certainly not applicable to all solutions. And I've seen many people go, RE framework, perfect solution for everything, and cram solutions into the RE framework in a way that is not natural and does not deliver value. I feel the RE framework is a great training tool to get people to realize you can split a job between multiple processes, you can use a queue, and you can do more than just the start, do, job, finish model. It's the very first step of microservices as I see it. Now, how many times have you been presented with a job where they say, do this? You speak to your SME, your business owner, whoever, and he goes, well, job does this, Mary does that, Abdul does that, we pass that to HR. When it comes back from HR, we pass that to accounting, and then we pass that bit down to human services. Who knows? When you get a job like that, it's just instinctive to go, right, how do I cram all of that into a process? Well, why? Why not have each one of those jobs, each one of those activities that someone does as a separate process and queue them all up so that process 1 can be done by a robot and process 2 can be done by a robot, process 3, they're all different steps to one logical process, but physically they're different processes on the server. It's a new way of thinking. If I was presented with a picture like this, the first question I'd ask myself is, can we improve the process? Can we do something to make it more efficient, more robust, better? Now, never assume you know more than the business owner, but asking that question, what would they do different to make it better if they could? You get some interesting answers. So let me provide a hypothetical with you. You needed to process an input document. The input document could be in an FTP server, in a SharePoint team server. It could be in an email, could be in a shared drive, F drive on the network, could be uploaded to a web server. It could be in a database. Who knows? It could be added anywhere, and you could get more new sources of data in the future that may or may not be part of the scope. What we have is a process that goes, all right, I'm going to start in the SharePoint location, look for SharePoint data. Another one that says, I'm going to monitor the emails, look for email data. Another one that monitors the FTP server, another one that monitors the shared drive, another one that monitors the database, another one that monitors the web server. And they all go, hey, I've got a document. And they'll take this document in whatever format it is, and they put it into a shared queue. And then we can apply the business logic, process the business logic. Doesn't matter whether the data came from a web server or an email or an FTP server. Doesn't matter where it came from. We've got it in a centralized location, and then we can process it. Now, I would suggest this processes multiple processes as well. We'll go down there further. But let's actually have one of each different source as its own process, monitoring its own job only. Now, what if you need to process data from an input document? And the input document can come in many formats. Maybe they're going to give you a Word document. Maybe they're going to give you a PDF. Maybe it'll be an email format. Maybe they'll give you a spreadsheet with the data you need to extract. Maybe it'll be a HTML file. We've all faced this problem. You think, I'm going to have to write the code. If it's this, do this. If it's this, do this. If it's this, do this. I'm sure you see where I'm going with this now. So we start, we do phase one, whatever it is. We go, if I've got a Word document and I identify it as a Word document, I'm going to do a process that does nothing but Word documents. Another process that does nothing but PDF documents. Another process that does nothing but emails, HTML and spreadsheets. Extracts the data that's relevant, the data we're looking for, however it does it, and puts it into a common data format, something we understand, so that phase two, which is the real business logic, goes, I don't care if it came in a Word document, email, PDF, spreadsheet. I've got the data now in a format I understand, give me what I need to do my job, and off I go. These are actually different processes running concurrently on the same server. So let's put it all together. We might get our data from SharePoint, might get it from email, we might get it from FTP. Doesn't matter where we get it from, we get that data and we stick it in a single queue. Then we've got a process that goes, all right, I've got a job in a queue. Is it a Word document? Is it a PDF document? Is it a spreadsheet? If it's a Word document, it sticks in another queue that's just for Word documents. If it's for PDF, it goes in the PDF queue. If it's a spreadsheet, it goes in the spreadsheet queue. Then we have a process for each one of these queues. If its data's in the queue, then the Word queue, then the word processing thing will process it, extract all the data that's needed, and put it in the data common data format. If it's a PDF, then the PDF will probably use OCR, extract the data it needs, and put it in the data common data format, etc., for spreadsheets and HTML, and then off you go with your business logic. So it's the two scenarios put together. Now I can hear you asking, what about concurrency? What about critical sections? What if we need to write data to somewhere? SQL databases handle it fairly well, but if you wanted to write it to a spreadsheet, if you want to write it to something else that doesn't really handle concurrency, how do we do that? And we had this problem all the time. Well, I want to upload something to a place, but I can't have 5 processes writing at the same time, such as a spreadsheet. But also things like ServiceNow. They don't like you writing to the same record concurrently 5 times if you log in as the same person. So how do we handle this scenario? Well, we've got all these multiple concurrent processes doing stuff. This one's doing Word, this one's doing HTML, this one's doing FTP, who knows? But they all stick their common data into a queue, and then we say, this process here can only run once. It can only be one process of this, which is your critical section, and this process goes, and I upload the data, I store the data to my spreadsheet, for example, or to my ServiceNow. And then it says, I've done, pass the ticket on, and we go back to multiple concurrencies. So we've got 5 concurrent processes doing stuff, all feeding data to our single critical process. Critical point there, does what it needs to do, says, I'm done, passes the ticket on, we go back to multiple processes. So why do we do this? What are the advantages? Why do we care? If you're debugging a process, it's much easier and much faster to debug a much smaller process. If you debug a process, it's a couple of 100 lines of code. That's much easier than debugging a process that's a couple of 100,000 lines of code. Testing, especially automated testing, it's faster, it's easier. If you've got a unit that does one thing, setting testing up, that's really good. If you've got units that do 10, 20, 30 things, testing it's awkward, to put it politely. And maintenance. Oh, look, something's happened. I've had a bug. The bug's in the bit that does the FTPs. Bring up the FTP process. Great. Changing for growth especially. Let's say we've got a new process. We're not just doing FTP. We're also pulling the data from some newfangled thing I've never heard of. Make that process. push the data to the common data format, and everything else just works. You don't bring the whole system down. You don't test the whole system. You only test what you change, and you only change the minimal because your process is minimal in scope. Hand over to a new developer. When the new developer, you say, hey, learn about FTP. He doesn't have to deal with all the complexity of other things. It's really, really, really much easier, much faster, much more robust, and it's also more efficient if you've got multiple computers and you're lucky in that scenario. In closing, I'd just like to say, if you aren't using automated testing, you really should think about it. Automated testing is amazing. The new UiPath test features are really great. Integration services, if you haven't looked at that, integration services, much like Logic Apps and all the new stuff from Microsoft, is triggering on events. It is really cool. Instead of saying, is there an email change? Is there an email change? Is there an email change? You set it up to say, hey, I've got a new email. Start a process. Integration service is already bringing a thought process that's very congruent with this. It says, when a file arrives, start a process, deal with it. So I strongly recommend you look at that. In closing, thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.